All right. Hey, everybody. It's Dr. J with my sidekick here. And I just wanted to give you an overview of Module 3. So welcome to our next module. So let's see what we are going to do in this module. I'm going to share my screen and get right into it. So in this module, we will talk about African-American writers in early America. And we'll focus on the writings of people like Phillis Wheatley. We'll talk about David Walker, and we'll also talk about Frederick Douglass in this particular module. So the first thing I want to do is give you kind of an overview of what was literature like for African-American people during the 1820s. And this gives you a synopsis of some of the general themes that are applicable to this era. And so we get right into a lecture of why the African-American writers were writing of what they were writing of and why they were writing it. And so there's this moment where many of the African-American writers that you see during this time period, they're going to be writing in preparation to give inspiration to people to join the anti-slavery movement. So writers were there to sway people. Writers were there to encourage people, to bring attention to some of the political issues that were happening during this time. And so you see a really amazing lecture by a really cool guy. This is a very good general kind of sense of what culture and what life was like for many African-American people and why they were writing about what they were writing about. And so one of the people that we're introduced to and we focus on is David Walker. And David Walker writes this very, very famous piece, which is called David Walker's Appeal. And so we get introduced to David Walker on this next page. And as we comb through that, of course, I have to give you a synopsis of what the actual David Walker's Appeal was. So remember, early writers are writing to sway people, to get them inspired, encouraged, and aware of the anti-slavery movement. And so here it is, David Walker's appeal to the Black folks of the world, basically. And keep in mind, this is a really interesting piece of work. Literature like this was absolutely illegal. There were people who smuggled this book. Imagine if we were doing this right now in the 21st century. I mean, it blows my mind sometimes how information still is a commodity, and people who have it usually have the power. So the David Walker's Appeal document was such a big document that many African-American people were smuggling it. I've heard stories of people sewing pieces of it into their clothing, just trying to conceal it, preserve it, and circulate it by any means necessary. So you could take a look at the writings of David Walker in that famous David Walker's Appeal document. And then next we are introduced to Phillis Wheatley. And Phillis Wheatley is a really, really amazing story of a human being, a Black woman, an African woman, who basically defied the odds like many of us do. And I want to say this, when we say defy the odds, it's because we're giving folks a context of limitation. It's almost like if you say, I'm not expecting for this person to read, but then this person ends up not only reading and writing a book, then they defy the odds. But if you recontextualize that and you say, this person actually comes from literary creators, this person is responsible for investing in linguistic development of Bantu languages. And if you give us that type of context, like we are destined, we are already excellent, then things like slavery become contextualized as an interruption in our excellence. And so even though we recognize Phillis Wheatley as a woman who dared the odds, it's because people didn't understand who she was from the beginning or who we were from the beginning. Remember, y'all, there's a moment in our history where they barely thought that we were human. And so I don't get into that in this particular course. But Phillis Wheatley, if they knew the potential of who we were as a people, then she would have come as no surprise. She would have been the standard. But because the bar was set so low for many of our people, Phillis Wheatley seems like a conundrum. But that does not take away from the power of who she was, because given the context of enslavement, of racism, of white supremacy, she absolutely becomes a superstar in this era. And so Phillis Wheatley, phenomenal legacy of a woman, phenomenal legacy of a writer, of a woman, of a African person, just speaking to the times and the reality of the times that she was living in. And so you get an introduction to Phillis Wheatley. And of course, we have to read some of her work. I gave you two of the poems that I thought that were really cool and something that wasn't like typical. I wanted to give you guys something that was a little fun and creative. Okay, so this is two of her poems, A Hymn to the Evening, and another one on imagination. And I love this one on imagination. So take a good read of that. And then finally, we close out with a writer, and not only a writer, but also a politician. Some would say a community organizer, activist, legendary person, Frederick Douglass. And sometimes we joke about Frederick Douglass, you know, people hair looking like Frederick, they all kind of stuff about Frederick, but Frederick Douglass was actually a very phenomenal human being. And so I want to introduce you to him. I give you a short synopsis of who he was and some of the contributions that he made, but we focus on this particular speech that he has. Now, even though this is not a particular literary work, we're going to use this for literary analysis, okay? And so I wanted to introduce you all to this infamous speech that Frederick Douglass gives, What to the Slave is 4th of July. And some of us might resonate with this particular speech. Some of us might be like, oh my God, what? But nonetheless, I wanted to make sure I introduce you guys to one of the my more favorite pieces of Frederick Douglass. So take a read of that. Check that out. And then once we are ready for our discussion board for the week, I want you to first think about this particular question. Do you think the artists of today have a responsibility to address the social, political, and racial issues in their art? You know, and the curious thing about it is that I don't think we think of artists like this now as having a responsibility. You know, I don't know if we have even, I don't know if we expect this. And nor do I think that we should or should not, but I want you to consider that, okay? Because during the 1820s, during the anti-slavery movement, that actually was one of the biggest pieces of the movement, was having people as spokespeople. And many of these spokespeople tend to be writers, preachers, artists, okay? And so when we think about our current reality, now let's not get it twisted. African people are not necessarily free from police brutality. We are not free from discrimination. We are not free from racial prejudice. We are not free from white supremacy. That has not gone anywhere. This is still alive and well. And so in the context of that reality, should there be some artists that speak to that? You know, and as many of you all get to know me, I'm a hip hop head, I'm a hip hop scholar, I'm a hip hop artist, I'm a hip hop person, you know. And so one of the things that I do know is that, yeah, there are some hip hop artists that use their art to speak to the times, but we don't necessarily hear that on the radio. You know, the closest that we're getting to it right now is maybe this All My Life song with J. Cole and Young Dirt. I don't know, but Lil Durk. But the point is that I want you to think about it in a discussion. Do you think the artists of today have a responsibility to talk about what's going on in the world? Right? Yes, no, maybe so, I don't know. But let's talk about it. And then remember, not only to make your post for the discussion board, but also to make the post responding to the post of two of your classmates. Okay, so don't forget that. That's very key in you being able to get full credit for that discussion post assignment. And when I grade you guys' work, I can definitely see if you're responding to your classmates as well. And so as I mentioned to you, for our intellectual journal for this particular module, we're going to focus on the actual literary work of Frederick Douglass by looking at the speech, What to the Slave is the 4th of July. And I know that sometimes when we read things, they seem to be a little overwhelming because of the vernacular and the language that they're written in. And so I love being able to get you all some kind of audio or some type of video of someone reading the work to you. So you can check out this video if you so are inclined, of James Earl Jones, a legendary actor, and he is reading the speech, What to the Slave is 4th of July. So check that out. And then I want you to really get a sense of how this particular writing spoke to the reality of the social, political, racial reality of African people during this time. I want you to think about, how did Frederick Douglass capture this, okay? And how did he measure? He refers to this thing as called the distance between African people and early Americans. And remember, we're talking about the 4th of July. And so he's noticing that there's some kind of disconnect. There's some kind of disconnect here between what it means to celebrate 4th of July if you're Black and what it means to celebrate 4th of July if you are not Black. And I think it's so curious for us to look at how is he measuring these distances or these differences. And I want you to kind of even consider, are these things still prevalent today? Have we got beyond these things? Do we equally feel as American right now in 2024 as the next person who, maybe has a different experience with this country? Do Black folks feel like we finally are American and that we're free and that we're good to go? We're good to fly our flag proudly. It's a question. It's a question to ask. And so as you close out this particular module, these are the things that I want you to wrestle with. Okay. And so we are done with that module as we close out for our intellectual journal for that particular for that page. Okay, so again, welcome to module 3. If you have any questions, any concerns, any criticism, any feedback, you guys know I'm here to help, to support you. I do want to make sure that those of you who have some paperwork that I need to follow up on, I will be following up on that on Monday morning. I apologize to anybody if anybody's ever was dropped for instance, by accident. If that's the case, just please reach out to me. If you know for sure you haven't turned in any work and you know for sure that you were not necessarily doing what you're supposed to be doing, then yes, I dropped you. But some of you guys were dropped in error. So I just want to make sure I acknowledge that and apologize to those of y'all for that. And I'll fix that Monday morning. But for the most part, enjoy. All right. Welcome, welcome. Continue to thrive, y'all. Love you. Bye.